This is money that was never real. You could never hold it. You could never spend it. It didn't exist as a single coin or a single bill. And yet, this invisible money did something almost no country in history has ever pulled off. It stopped the worst inflation on the planet dead in about a year. In the early 1990s, Brazil was a country where prices doubled every single month, where your paycheck could lose half its value before you even finished spending it, where the economy was, by every normal rule, completely and utterly broken. And then a small group of economists fixed it, not with more money, but with money that was fake, on purpose. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how they did it, slowly, step by step, so it actually makes sense. No confusing jargon, no scary charts, just one of the wildest, smartest tricks in the entire history of money. And by the end, I promise you'll never look at the cash in your pocket the same way again. Because here's the thing, almost nobody tells you about money. Most of its value is in your head, but we'll get to that. First, you need to understand just how insane things had gotten in Brazil. Because once you do, what these people pulled off becomes almost unbelievable. Picture this. You walk into a supermarket, you grab a carton of milk off the shelf, but before you even reach the checkout, an employee walks down the aisle with a price gun and raises the price of that exact milk while you're holding it. That actually happened. Prices in Brazilian stores were changing every single day. Sometimes more than once a day. Restaurants stopped printing prices on their menus because they couldn't keep up. People would get paid and then literally run to the store that same afternoon to spend their entire paycheck at once. Because if they waited even a few days, that money would buy noticeably less. This is called hyperinflation, and Brazil's was one of the worst the modern world had ever seen. We're talking prices rising 40, 50% every month. Over a year, that piles up into inflation in the thousands of percent. Now think about what that does to a normal person. You can't save. Why would you? Any money you put aside just melts away. You can't plan for anything. You can't trust a single number. The entire idea of how much something costs simply stops working. So the obvious question is, why didn't they just fix it? And the answer is, they tried over and over and over again. And every single time they failed. Brazil had already launched plan after plan to kill inflation. 6 major attempts in less than a decade. They tried freezing prices by law, telling every business in the country, you are not allowed to raise your prices. At one point, they even froze people's bank accounts, locking up their savings. It worked for a few months. And then inflation came roaring right back, sometimes worse than before. So why? Why couldn't anyone stop it? Here's the part that changes everything. The economists studying the problem realized something strange. Brazil's inflation wasn't really being driven by the normal stuff anymore. It had mutated into something else, something almost psychological. They called it inertial inflation. Let me explain it as simply as I can. Imagine everyone in the country expects prices to go up next month. So what does a shop owner do? She raises her prices right now to stay ahead. What does a worker do? He demands a raise right now to keep up. What does a landlord do? Raises the rent right now. Everybody is raising their prices because everybody expects everybody else to raise theirs. And that expectation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Prices go up simply because everyone is certain that prices are going to go up. The inflation was feeding itself. It had become a habit, a reflex, baked into the entire country. And you cannot freeze a reflex. That is why the price freezes failed. You can force prices to stop for a little while, but the second you let go, everyone's expectations snap right back and the whole machine starts spinning again. So the team was staring at an almost impossible puzzle. How do you stop something that exists inside people's minds? How do you break a habit shared by 150 million people? And the answer they came up with was so strange, so backwards, that it honestly sounds like a magic trick. They decided they would not fight the prices directly. Instead, they would change the one thing that every single price was being measured in, the money itself. Now stay with me, because this is the clever part. In 1994, the government introduced a brand new currency. They called it the URV, but here's the twist. The URV was not real money. You couldn't hold it. There were no URV coins, no URV bills. You couldn't actually pay for anything with it. It existed only on paper as a number. So What was the point? Here's what they did. They told the entire country, from now on, list all of your prices in URV. Your salary is now a number of URVs. Your rent is a number of URVs. The price of a cup of coffee is a number of URVs, but you still paid with the old, broken currency, the one that was losing value every day. And every single day, the government published one exchange rate, how many units of the old money a single URV was worth, and that rate climbed a little every day, exactly tracking inflation. Now watch what this quietly does. In the old money, the price of a coffee was shooting up constantly, pure chaos. But in URVs, that coffee costs the same today as it did yesterday, and the same again tomorrow. A salary was a steady number of URVs. Rent was a steady number of URVs. For the first time in years, prices stopped moving, not because they were frozen by force, but because everyone was suddenly measuring value with a ruler that stayed the same. Think about it like this. Imagine you'd spent years trying to measure things with a ruler that shrank a little every single day. Nothing would ever measure the same twice. Total madness. The URV was a ruler that finally held its length. And just like that, everyone could see what things actually cost again. And here is the real genius of it. By forcing the whole country to think in this stable unit, day after day after day, the economists were quietly retraining an entire nation's brain. Month by month, people got used to prices that didn't change. The reflex, that deep habit of always bracing for the next price hike, slowly started to fade. The expectation of inflation was finally breaking. For about 4 months, Brazilians lived this strange double life, thinking in stable URVs, but paying with the old melting money. 2 currencies at once, one imaginary, one real. And then came the final move. On July 1st, 1994, the government flipped the switch. They took the URV, the fake money, the number that only existed on paper, and they turned it into a real, physical currency. New coins, new bills. They named it the real. 1 URV became 1 real. The old broken money was retired for good. And just like that, the imaginary ruler that everyone had already been using for months became the actual cash in their hands. And it worked. Not for a few months this time, for good. Monthly inflation that had been screaming along at 40, 50% crashed down to just a couple percent. Almost immediately, the chaos stopped. People could save again, plan again, trust a price tag again. A country that had been economically broken for over a decade became, almost overnight, stable. And that currency they basically conjured out of thin air, Brazil still uses the real today, more than 30 years later. So why did this work when freezing prices by force had failed every single time? Because the team understood the secret I mentioned at the very start. The value of money is mostly in your head. A coin, a bill, it's just paper and metal. What makes it worth something is a shared belief. Millions of people all agreeing, all trusting that it has value. Brazil's inflation was, at its core, a crisis of belief. Everyone believed prices would rise, so they did. The URV didn't fix the economy with force. It fixed people's expectations. It changed the story that an entire country was telling itself about money. And once you change the belief, reality follows. It's almost poetic, really. They solved a very real problem with money that was completely fake. Oh, and one more thing. The finance minister who led this entire gamble, the man who bet a nation's future on invisible money, his name was Fernando Henrique Cardoso, and the plan worked so well that just a few months later, the country elected him president. So here's something to sit with. If a country can save itself by inventing money out of nothing, then money is far more fragile and far stranger than you ever thought. Which leads to a genuinely terrifying question. What happens when a country does the exact opposite? When it prints so much money that it destroys itself from the inside out? That's a story with a very different ending. And I break down the most extreme example in all of history in this video right here. Go watch it next. I promise it'll make this one look gentle.